His hand gripped my waist hard, anchoring me as he pressed deeper into me, breath heavy in my ear, his chest damp against my back. My palms braced flat against the hallway wall, right next to the half-finished trim, paintbrushes still resting on the drop cloth below us. The paint fumes hadn't even settled when he pushed inside, rough-kneading, trembling. His belt buckle was still half dangling. Mine was somewhere by the baseboard heater. I remember because my hips slammed into it when I gasped too loud, and he shushed me, his lips barely brushing my hairline. Don't make a sound," he murmured. Teeth clenched. My mouth opened but nothing came out. The air caught in my throat as his hand slid under my shirt nails, skimming up my ribs, while his other palm stayed locked on my mouth. The floorboards creaked behind us, and I froze, every inch of me tightening. "Keep quiet," he said again. I wanted to scream, not from pain, not even from guilt, but because of how alive I felt. I never imagined I'd cross this line, not with him, not in my own home, while my husband was at work, and the sun was still casting shadows through the hall window. I'm 39. I've been married for 15 years. I host book clubs, clip coupons, clean baseboards. I don't do this. And he's 27. He was here to repaint our front hallway. Part-time work while he studied at the local trade school. My husband liked him, trusted him, said he was quiet, reliable, a hard worker. That first week, I offered him coffee. By the second week, I was watching the way his arms flexed while he worked. And by the third, I found myself standing a little too long in the hallway, asking questions I already knew the answers to. He always looked me in the eyes when he talked. Too long, too still. And he never smiled, not really. But the heat in his gaze made something deep inside me ache. The first time it happened, it was a Tuesday. Rain outside. My husband had left for the city. I brought him a towel because he'd been soaked unloading paint cans from his truck. I handed it to him. He took it, and then he didn't move. I didn't either. He reached out and touched my wrist, just a thumb tracing the veins. That was all. But I swear my knees went weak. By the time he kissed me, I didn't even flinch. I just closed my eyes, and I let go. We told ourselves it was a mistake, that it couldn't happen again. We lasted 6 days, and now we don't talk much. We just look, and the moment we're alone, something tight snaps open, and neither of us tries to stop it. He takes what he wants. I give what I shouldn't. But here's the question that's haunted me every night. What would you do if the one thing that made you feel alive was also the secret that could destroy your life? This last time, the hallway, the drop cloth, the half-wet wall. It was different. The pressure of his weight, the way I bit into the back of my hand just to stay silent. The click of the gate outside, even though no one came in. I remember when he finished, he didn't say a word. He just stepped back, tucked himself in, and left the room. And I was still braced against the wall, pulse hammering, breath ragged. Then, babe. It was my husband's voice from the driveway. I yanked my shirt down, scrambled for my belt. My legs barely held. And as I knelt to grab the scattered tools and shove them into a paint bucket, I realized one thing. The roller was still wet, and there were 2 coffee mugs in the hallway. He was home early. If you've ever felt the thrill of doing something you shouldn't, and the fear of getting caught, you're not alone. Please like and subscribe. The longer you stay, the more stories like this will find the people who need them. Let's begin. Our home was always quiet, predictable. The kind of house where you could hear the refrigerator hum from the next room. The kind of life where Thursday night was pasta, and we argued more about grocery brands than anything intimate. I wasn't unhappy. I don't think, I just didn't feel much of anything anymore. You forget how to want things when your days all blur together. My husband, Greg, is steady practical. He comes home by 6, kisses my cheek, and asks about my day, with eyes already on his phone. There's nothing cruel in him, nothing wrong. But when he touches me, when he remembers to, it feels more like habit than hunger, like checking something off the list. And I never complained. Not really. You don't destroy a marriage over something so small. At least that's what I used to think until Alex started painting. He came recommended by a neighbor, said he'd just finished a cabinetry job and was picking up part-time work over summer break. His tools were older, but his hands were steady. First job was the front hallway, then the guest room, then the trim near the kitchen. Each day he'd arrive by 9. I'd hand him coffee and he'd nod, barely speaking, then slip his earbuds in and get to work. The silence between us should have been uncomfortable. Instead, it became this charge. I'd feel it when I walked past him or stood behind him while he was painting low crouched near the floor, the muscles in his back shifting under his shirt, the sweat starting at the nape of his neck. I started dressing a little differently. I told myself it was the heat, that my tank tops and soft shorts were just more comfortable. But deep down, I knew what I was doing. And I saw the way his eyes tracked me when he thought I wasn't looking. He never leered, never said anything crude. He didn't have to. There was this one moment that changed everything. He was up on a ladder, taping off the top of the window frame in the living room. I was dusting behind the couch, at least pretending to, when his phone rang. He climbed down, checking it, frowning. And then he sighed this deep, slow sound and muttered under his breath, "She just doesn't get it." I wasn't supposed to hear it, but I did. "She?" I asked quietly, not turning. He didn't answer right away, just set his phone face down on the drop cloth, then almost too soft to catch X. "Well, not really. It's messy." I still remember the way he looked at me then, like he hadn't meant to say anything. But now that he had, there was no going back. "You okay?" I asked. His eyes locked on mine. "Are you?" That moment was the first crack. It didn't happen right away, but the next day he brought 2 coffees instead of 1. And instead of leaving right after cleaning up, he lingered. We talked about books, his classes, music. One afternoon I made a joke, something about the hallway color being too pale like a hospital. And he smiled a real smile, sharp, a little crooked, and something in me twisted. The touch came 2 days later. He reached for a screwdriver at the same time I bent to grab the cloth. Our hands brushed. Nothing dramatic. No sparks, just warm skin on skin. But I looked up and his eyes were already on me. He didn't pull away, and neither did I. We didn't kiss that day, but something passed between us, something invisible but loud. I felt it in my stomach, in my chest, like something had started unraveling. And I didn't know how to stop it. After that, the silence between us changed. It wasn't just quiet. It was waiting. A week later, during a rainstorm, it finally happened. He'd been soaked from the shoulders down. I ran to grab a towel, made him come in through the side door. He stripped off his hoodie. His shirt clung to him sheer with rain, and I handed him the towel without thinking. And when our hands touched, he didn't move. He just stared at me, breathing shallow. And I stepped closer, just 1 inch. He didn't ask. He didn't hesitate. His hand went to my jaw, and he kissed me like he was starving, like he'd wanted it for weeks, months. I felt his fingers curl into my back, pulling me tight, and I didn't resist. Not once. Afterward, I told myself it was the rain, the moment that it wouldn't happen again. But it did, and each time after the danger only made it worse. I started checking the window blinds, without realizing, listening for tires in the gravel, checking my husband's location, like I was tracking a ghost. It was like I'd stepped into someone else's life, someone who made reckless, breathless decisions, someone who wanted to be wanted. We became shadows in the same house, passing each other in doorways, brushing too close near open windows. No words, just the heat of his shoulder grazing mine as I handed him a fresh paint tray. My fingers lingered longer than they should have. His thumb touched mine every time he took it. Some days we said nothing at all, but my body always knew the second he walked in. Like the air changed. It wasn't always physical. Sometimes it was worse. The text messages started simple. Project updates, delivery times. But then, Alex to 14 p.m. Did you wear that on purpose? I stared at it for a full minute before replying to 16 p.m. What if I did? No answer. Not until later that night. Alex, 11:47 p.m. Still thinking about it. I shouldn't be. I didn't sleep much after that. The next morning I passed him coffee and said nothing. But when he reached for the mug, our fingers touched, and he looked right at me. No smile, no words, just heat. I stepped back fast, like it burned. That week was the worst, or maybe the best, because the more we resisted, the worse it got. We started finding excuses to be in the same room alone. Me checking the trim lines, him asking if I had more masking tape, even though I knew he kept an extra roll in his bag. He'd lean too close behind me while showing me the color samples on his phone. His breath would hit the curve of my neck. I'd pretend not to feel it. One time I dropped a glass in the kitchen, not on purpose, but maybe my hands were shaking. I bent to pick it up, and he was already crouching beside me. Our eyes met. He didn't move. I felt his knee brush mine. The warmth of it, the stillness. And then my husband called from the living room asking what broke. We jumped apart like we were children caught sneaking candy. That was the first time I really felt it, the possibility of being caught. But it didn't stop us. It only made everything tighter, hungrier. One afternoon, the front door creaked open while we were alone. I was standing in the narrow hallway, him behind me, walking close enough that I could feel the heat of him through my dress. The door's hinges groaned. We froze. Both of us stared at each other like deer in headlights. I was sure it was my husband, or a neighbor, or worse, someone who'd see something, but it was just the wind. Still, I didn't breathe for 10 seconds. Alex moved away, first cleared his throat, picked up a brush like nothing had happened. I stood there for another minute, heart punching my ribs. Later that day I asked him, "Does this scare you?" He paused, mid-stroke, eyes still on the wall. Every second he said he didn't look at me. Neither of us brought it up again. Another time I walked into the guest bedroom while he was painting the baseboards. He was crouched low, paint-speckled shirt, hugging his back. I should have walked out. Instead, I closed the door behind me. It clicked shut, too loud. His head turned slowly. I didn't say anything. I just leaned back against the door and watched him. His brush paused mid-air. I saw his throat move as he swallowed. "I can't concentrate when you look at me like that," he said, voice low. I didn't stop looking, but I didn't touch him. Not that time. The silence between us pulsed, and then knock-knock on the front door. My stomach dropped. I scrambled to unlock the bedroom door. My friend Jamie stood there, grinning, holding a bag of muffins. Surprise. Thought I'd drop in. She walked right past me into the kitchen. I smiled too wide. My hands were shaking. She didn't see him slip out the back door 5 minutes later, didn't notice the small paint stain on the inside of my thigh. When I finally glanced down in the bathroom mirror, close. Too close. Every day after that, the space between us got thinner. A shared glance, a closed door, the brush of his fingertips when he handed me a paint sample. I wasn't breathing anymore. I was waiting for the next time he'd touch me, waiting to get caught and terrified because I knew I wasn't going to stop him. It was the argument that cracked everything open. Greg came home from work earlier than usual that Thursday. Something about the budget being a mess, the firm cutting hours. He was agitated, slamming drawers, mumbling about incompetence. I tried to calm him off for dinner, but he waved me off and asked in that flat, distracted way he had if I could stop letting the painter leave his stuff in the hallway. "He's not here to move in," he muttered, rubbing his temple. "Tell him to be more professional." I said something I shouldn't have. Maybe if someone else around here appreciated how hard he works. The silence that followed was sharp. Greg looked at me like I'd slapped him. What the hell does that mean? Nothing, eh? I said too fast. He shook his head, muttering under his breath as he disappeared into the bedroom. I didn't eat dinner. I didn't even sit down. I just paced the kitchen palms, sweating. I texted Alex at 8:12 p.m. Me. Can you come tomorrow morning earlier than usual? He responded 4 minutes later. Alex. Yes. You okay? I didn't answer. I just left the porch light on. He showed up at 7:36 a.m. I was still in my robe, hair tied up, no makeup. I opened the door and he stood there for a second. Tools in hand, eyes scanning my face. I stepped back, wordless. He stepped in, shut the door. The second it latched, I grabbed his shirt, tugged him toward the narrow hallway that still smelled faintly of paint. He didn't ask. His lips hit mine like a storm. Fast, clumsy, needy. His bag dropped with a loud thud. I gasped against his mouth, not because of the sound, but because I didn't care. Not anymore. I fumbled with his belt. He yanked the sash of my robe loose. The fabric fell away from my skin, and his hands were already on my hips, fingers digging in like he couldn't believe I was real. I turned to face the wall, bracing myself, breath catching in my chest. His warmth hit me from behind, hard, unapologetic. When he pressed into me, I bit my lip to keep from crying out. Everything about it was frantic, desperate. He moved deeper, and I felt it, the tremble in his legs, the way his hand gripped the base of my neck, trying to keep himself grounded. I shouldn't, he whispered, forehead pressed to my shoulder. We shouldn't. But he didn't stop. I didn't want him to. Every stroke echoed in my ribs. I reached back and gripped his thigh, anchoring him. Quiet, he breathed into my ear. Please. I nodded, eyes clenched shut. My face pressed to the cold hallway wall next to a streak of fresh paint that hadn't dried properly. His breath hitched, then stilled. He held inside me, arms wrapped tight, both of us shaking. No words, just silence. It was a long minute before he pulled away carefully. My robe fell loosely around me. My knees didn't want to hold. I sank to the floor. He crouched in front of me, brushing a hair from my cheek, eyes searching mine like he wanted to say something. But I heard it then, the sound that would haunt me for weeks. A knock on the back door. He froze. I shot up too fast, my heart pounding in my throat. I raced to the kitchen, pulled my robe tight, wiped my mouth. When I opened the door, it was the delivery guy, dropping off a replacement part for the fridge. Sorry to use the back front door was blocked. I mumbled something, took the box. My hands were shaking so hard, I nearly dropped it. When I turned, Alex was gone from the hallway. The sound of water running in the bathroom masked his footsteps. I leaned against the counter, heart jackhammering, because we had crossed a line again. And I wasn't sure I wanted to go back. Something shifted after that morning. Not between us, that stayed the same. Still full of tension and breathless silence. Still charged with want. But around us, things began to fray. Greg started watching me more closely. Not accusing, just noticing. He'd mention how quiet I'd gotten, how I barely touched my coffee some mornings, how I'd forget what day it was. I laughed it off, said I wasn't sleeping well, that maybe it was hormones. He offered to take me to dinner somewhere nice. I said I wasn't feeling up to it. And I wasn't. I couldn't sit across from him without feeling Alex's breath on my skin. One afternoon I caught Greg standing in the hallway, the one Alex had painted, just staring at the wall. Something wrong. I asked, voice too high. He shrugged. No, just weird. This patch looks different. I stared hard at where he pointed, a subtle streak in the lower trim, too faint for most people to notice, but I knew what it was. I remembered pressing my hand against the wall to steady myself that morning, remembered the warmth of Alex's chest against my back, while the paint was still soft. Greg didn't press, just nodded and walked off. But I stood there for 10 minutes, chest tight, ears ringing. Alex started texting less, still showed up on time, still touched my wrist when no one was watching. Still kissed me in the laundry room once when Greg was out walking the dog. But something in his face had changed. He was quieter. One afternoon he caught me in the kitchen, hand hovering over my phone like I was waiting for something. "You all right?" he asked. "I don't know," I whispered. "Do I look all right?" He stared at me, then shook his head. "We should stop." I looked down. "I know." But we didn't. I started checking the door locks more often, triple-checking the curtains, setting timers on my phone so I'd always know when Greg would be home. The paranoia didn't come from guilt, not exactly. It came from how easy it had become, how natural it felt to lean against Alex when he passed behind me, how quick my body responded when he brushed my hand, how good it felt to be wanted. And then I made a mistake. I left my phone on the couch unlocked. Greg picked it up to silence a call and saw a message flash across the top. Not from Alex, just a notification from our home security app. But his eyes narrowed, like he was suddenly seeing things that didn't fit. Why did the front door open at 7:30 a.m.? Yesterday, he asked. I froze. Maybe I went to get the paper. You hate getting the paper. I smiled too fast. Maybe I needed fresh air. He didn't press, just handed me the phone slowly. But I didn't sleep that night. I lay awake staring at the ceiling, wondering how long I had before everything caved in. And the worst part. Even in that fear, the rising, gnawing dread part of me still wanted him, still wanted Alex, still craved the way he'd grab my hips and pull me back into him like he needed me to breathe. It was sick and selfish, and I couldn't stop. So the next day, I told him to come over, and he did. We didn't touch. Not that day. We just stood in the garage 5 feet apart, saying nothing for a long time. Then he said, "This isn't going to end well, is it?" "No," I said. "But I don't want it to end yet." He didn't smile, didn't nod. He just reached forward, ran his hand down my arm. Once, soft, slow, and left without a word. Every time the phone buzzes, I think it's the end. But I still check it anyway. It wasn't Greg who found out. It was Erin, my sister. She stopped by unannounced one Friday morning, something she'd done 100 times before, always with coffee and gossip, and a bag of bagels. I didn't hear the door. I'd been in the hallway with Alex, not touching, not that time. He was crouched low, repainting a corner trim he'd nicked with the stepladder. I was standing just behind him, arms crossed, watching the way his forearm flexed as he smoothed the brush. I didn't hear the door, but she saw everything when she walked in. She froze at the edge of the hallway, one foot still on the doormat, holding 2 coffees. Alex stood quickly, eyes going wide. I turned so fast I nearly tripped on the drop cloth. "Erin," I breathed. Her eyes flicked from him to me. She didn't say a word. Just set the coffees on the entryway table, turned and left. I didn't move. Neither did Alex. She didn't answer her phone for 2 days. When she finally did, her voice was ice. "Do you have any idea what you're doing?" I didn't answer. She exhaled hard. "He's a kid. He's 27, and you're married." "Silence. You can't keep this a secret forever," she said. "And I'm not going to lie for you. I'm not asking you to." "You don't have to," she snapped. "But I'm already involved. I already saw it." I hung up before she could say more. Alex didn't come back the next day or the one after. He texted once. "Alex, 7:04 p.m. I think this is where I step back before it gets worse." I stared at that message until my screen dimmed. I didn't reply. I didn't know what to say. It didn't feel like an ending, just a slow, aching unraveling. Greg noticed. Of course he did. The paint supplies disappeared. The hallway remained half-finished for weeks. He asked why Alex never returned. I said the job was over. He frowned, said it wasn't. Not really, but he didn't push. Not then. But I saw it in his face, that flicker of doubt. The way he started closing the bathroom door again, How he stopped setting his phone face down on the table. He didn't know, not fully, but he sensed. And that was almost worse. I still walk through that hallway every day. Still see the smudge near the corner where my back hit the wall. I haven't painted over it. I don't know why. Maybe part of me wants to be caught. Maybe part of me wants to be seen. But mostly, I just miss how it felt to be wanted, to be needed with urgency, to be someone's secret. We were careful. We thought we were invisible. But secrets don't stay secrets forever. And I don't know what scares me more, losing him or being found out.